Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a late night frontline update for the 24th of July, very soon to be 25th. In fact, it will be about halfway through this video, UK time anyway. So we will start with the key to the maps. If you don't know what my map lines mean, please check out the key. Although I am not showing the lines for Deep State map because I essentially haven't had time to do it. I am very behind schedule at the moment. Too much yabbering on to you guys for too long, so I don't have time to do the mapping at the moment. Anyway, although I have done the map for, or the lines for, sorry, Andrew Perpetua's map and Surat maps. Okay. So we're going to start in the north around Vovchansk and indeed Hliobike. It looks like the Russians are pushing back in several areas of these two sectors up here. So first of all, on Hliobike, according to Surat maps, the Russians have pushed the Ukrainians back out of parts of Hliobike, the northern warehouses here, and a little bit of a rejig up there, but generally pushed the Ukrainians out of those areas. The Institute for the Study of War Daily Report, which Benny Pye has sorted out the AI summary of that already summary, so it's really distilling it. So check out my ATP distilled website that is linked in the description below. Thank you so much, Ben. So we have got a few little nuggets here. Russian Mill blogger argued that Russia should adopt Ukraine's use of light aircraft such as the Yak-52 and Aeroprakt A-22 to counter the increasing use of drones in a conflict. And a Russian serviceman revealed that the Russian Rex-1 anti-drone gun, while in use by his unit, is ineffective against targets operating below 2.4 gigahertz. In other words, they are struggling with drones. A good omission there of that. But to talk about the Vovchansk and Hliobike areas, the Russian forces continued localized offensive operations north and northeast of Kharkiv, reportedly pushing Ukrainian forces out of Hliobike. Clashes also occurred near Vovchansk, and Ukrainian officials reported that Russian forces are concentrating their efforts in Hliobike and Vovchansk. So they are looking at pushing the Ukrainians back. The Ukrainians had had some fairly decent success in these areas. Now, if we go towards Vovchansk, no change to the mapping there, but it looks like the Russians are very active around here, as according to ISW. The Ukrainians have pushed the Russians out of an area near Staritsia to the west of Staritsia, although to be quite well, in fact, let's go to the tweet from Surat Maps here. So they say, or he says, from Kharkiv access during the last 7 days, the Russian army has managed to recapture the northern warehouses of Hliobike, securing again the control over the locality. So that's where we were talking about just then. From the Chuhiv axis, so this is the one closer to Vovchansk, new correction was made showing that the reservoir northwest of Staritsia was also retaken by the Ukrainian army between the last days of June and the first week of July. So this is to say that it was taken a long time ago. Sorry about that, got that one wrong. Or it can be very difficult, to be honest, if you don't see direct evidence of a particular thing happening, then it can be months before you know actually that the control has changed somewhere. However, there's a huge difference here between Andrew Perpetua's and Surat Mats's defensive lines for the Russians. So it could just be that, oh look, there's evidence that the Ukrainians are active here, which Andrew Perpetua never really believed that the Russians had control of that area anyway. So it could just be a quiet, humble, maybe not so humble, admission that the original mapping was overzealous. It's the same sort of thing I always say to you guys, right? Anyway, it's good to see some blue there, even if it isn't a counterattack over the last 24 hours, because let's face it, almost all the territorial gains at the moment are in the Russian favour. And although I often talk about these being sort of grinding small amounts of territory, and they do come at inordinate cost for the Russians, there's no doubt about that, they are still making consistent grinding gains in the Pokrovsk area, further to the south near Vuhledar, and then areas of the northeastern sector as well, but particularly around the Pokrovsk region, Krasnohorivka, it is definitely challenging for the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are losing territory and troops. The Russians are losing huge amounts of troops, but they are taking that land. Anyway, it was interesting, actually. I think I've got it down to share with you tomorrow, which is someone looking at the idea that I said yesterday, metrics of success. Ukrainians have different metrics, and it's not always territory. And there was a really explicit exposition of that position. But anyway, we'll come to that. Right, so in the northeastern axis from Kupiansk to Svatova to Kreminna, we can see that Andrew Perpetua agrees that Pischany is under control of the Russians now, broadly in its entirety, and maybe a little grey zone here and there. And Syriac Maps has their Russians extending that control further to the west towards the Oskil River. So they really are getting closer and closer to the Oskil River. And the problem is, if they can reach that, they are only 5.5 kilometers away. If they can reach that and gain a foothold there, they can slowly push north and south from there and be able to supply in across the land there through their bridgehead. And so, that then gives them a chance to extend and start filling in this land from the Oskil River to the east. That would be what they would plan, but of course these things take months and months and months just to get there, and then filling all that area in would take a lot of troops, a lot of effort, and a lot of time. And in the meantime, we might get F-16s operating in the area. We might get a degradation of the Russian air defense capabilities. We might see added drones, attack drones being used close to the front line if Ukraine upscale their drone production. There are lots of ifs and buts that things can change, but that would be, I assume, the intentions of the Russians there. So anyway, no change in the Terny and Tolska area, Serebranski Forest. We come to the Seversk front line and north of Solidar. Some gains for the Russians in Rozdalivka, and that is mentioned. I did see that somewhere. No reports talked about that as well, so that's confirmed from other sources too. Interestingly, when we do get down to Chaziv Yar, no changes to the Chaziv Yar front, which is really good news for the Ukrainians. It's tough fighting around there, but I've talked about how the Russians may be sort of reconstituting, just taking a breather before they really try and go at it across the canal. However, the ISW does say Ukrainian General Staff reported a high number of Russian attacks in the area, particularly north of Chaziv Yar. And actually, that's what we have seen, which is over here towards Herorivka. And from the Bodanivka area, the Russians have been very active around there. So that's probably what the ISW is referring to. No change to the Klishivka area. And when we come down to the Toretsk area, it's been really tough around there. Ukrainians have been ceding territory quite a bit. The Russians have been moving into these different urban areas, but no change in the last 24 hours to those two mappers, and a marginal change to the New York sector as well, further to the south for Andrew Perpetua, just a tree line that the Russians now are in control of, or a couple of tree lines there at the base of the bridgehead into New York. And then this is the sort of worrying area at the moment, right up and down the Pokrovsk region. The Russians are making these grinding gains. Now, it has to be said that, as we saw this morning in the hits and losses video, the Russians are losing lots and lots of vehicles, and therefore, you rest assured, personnel as well in this region. I mean, it does come at a cost, but this appears to be a cost that the Russians are willing to take. So if we look at Syriac Maps here, a number of places where they have had success. Just to summarize from Syriac Maps, situation on the Ocheritina and west of Avdiivka front, the Russians began advancing in Lozovatsky, trying to surround the Ukrainian trench systems north of Prokhrez. In addition, Russian troops entered in the first houses of Vovcha and captured another trench system northwest of Yevhenivka. Moreover, the locality of Novosibirsk, Persia was completely taken. Okay, let's put all of these on the map then. So we have Lozovatske, some area of land. This basically area there was taken by the Russians. That's definitely a worry. They are pushing further along this railway line and now appear to have complete control over Progress, or Progress, I think that is in English. The Russians are certainly making progress around there, that's for sure. And indeed, Andrew Perpetua has the Russians having all of this land sort of north of Voskhod. Yeah, that's a real challenge for the... In fact, I wonder if I haven't quite I've got the lines there I haven't updated, so that will be the same actually for Syriac maps as well. Let me just change out ever so quickly. Goodness me, that was frustrating. It hadn't saved a single one of my changes to Syriac maps in this whole region. Really, really weird. Not seen that on such a wide scale as this. Goodness me. Anyway, just quickly redone them from here on down. So you can see that there are some pretty big changes to the mapping around here. The Ukrainians really push back around Vovcha, around all of these settlements, Voskhod there, Yevhenivka there. And that was what was just mentioned in the Syriac maps update. So all of these little areas, some fairly substantial changes, and you can see that's the same in many of these with Andrew Perpetua. Some changes around Novosibirsk, Persia, particularly for both mappers, although Andrew Perpetua still has some of the southern outskirts of that settlement under in the grey zone, but Syriac maps fully in control of the Russians pretty much. And then right down at the bottom, around the Karlivka Reservoir, just south of there, some small gains for the Russians around some tree lines here. So yeah, that is challenging for the Ukrainians. And indeed, the first time we've seen some gains to the west of Mariinka or west of Herivka now, into this settlement of Maskimilianivka. That is a worry for the Ukrainians there. I don't think, no, it's just talk about Novosibirsk, Persia there. No talk about further down to the south. Now, just actually going back up to the Pokrovsk region. So let's put that back in the middle of the map here. So let's have a little bit of an analysis from Rob Lee. I did go through this with you this morning. Deep State says the operational tactical situation on the Pokrovsk front became critical over the weekend after the Ukrainian infantry brigade holding Progress conducted a chaotic retreat. The post suggests that they were not trained properly. So that's just to remind you, that's this settlement there, Progress, as I said, north of Vovcha. So yeah, all of this being taken due to the retreat of a Ukrainian unit. The 47th Mechanized Brigade, that often comes in to save the day, responded but could not hold the town due to lack of infantry. Now a pocket has been created north of the town, and the 1st and 3rd battalions from Ukraine's 31st Mechanized Brigade are at risk of encirclement, but they say there is no withdrawal order. So that could be in this area there, and also up there as well. So definitely an issue there. Also, Yuri Butasov, who's a Ukrainian journalist who's very honest, says the situation in Pokrovsk front is critical after Russia advanced 6 kilometers over the past 7 days. He says Russia deliberately focuses its assaults on the most vulnerable brigades that have poor command and control. He also notes a lack of coordination with the drones and electronic warfare, which leads to drone losses and electronic warfare fratricide. So the bringing down of your own drones due to your own electronic warfare. So I wonder if this is a sort of area where Magyar's birds could be brought to bear if they are having success up in Kharkiv. It depends if the Russians are pushing on there as well. But I know that they are operating in more than just one area. But definitely you could do with some expertise down on this front. Pokrovsk is is certainly a challenge. Now, as I was saying, the area west of Mariinka is looking like it's heating up again, and we're going to now just come down to Novomykhailivka. No change there, but that's because you might see some mapping changes tomorrow, because today there was some huge attacks there, or a huge attack. Let's go and actually find the footage of that. Now, remember, this was a village, town, well, village, I suppose. No, it's a little bit bigger. So this is a town that had been taken by the Russians, but it took an inordinate amount of effort for them to do so. They lost something like 320 vehicles around here. And if you just go and punch Novomykhailivka into Twitter now, I mean, you can see various things. This is from 2 days ago. So 72nd Brigade shows fields of destroyed Russian equipment, many of which are T-62 tanks in the Vuhledar-Novomykhailivka area at the front, 5 T-62s, infantry fighting vehicle, 1 MTLB, 2 BMP-2s, 2 BMP-1s, 1 Brem 1, 1 BTR-80 and 1 BTR-70. So this is a graveyard, and these are recent ones. These aren't like the 320 from previously. But today's activity was absolutely incredible. So, what is it? Huge battle between Ukrainian and Russian forces in Novomykhailivka. Russian forces numbering 13 vehicles and 200 people were repelled, and many were destroyed. That 13 vehicles is an understatement. It is not 13 vehicles, a lot more than that. Russian forces, no, not that one. So here we are. Huge Russian assault repelled in Novomykhailivka, Donetsk region. 11 tanks, 45 Russian armoured carriers and lots more, terrifying to face for the untrained, while other Europeans start their holidays and argue with the EU populace. It's fortunate that enough Ukrainian soldiers are still motivated. So really huge attack there today. As PS01 says, soldiers of 79th Brigade repelled one of the largest enemy assaults. In total, 57 armoured vehicles and some ghetto blasters, 12 motorcycles, 200 Russian attacks, 200 Russians attacked in different directions. The Russian army simultaneously used 11 tanks, 45 infantry fighting vehicles with infantry, and 1 Terminator BMPT. So that's a sort of infantry fighting vehicle, sort of come tank, really, with can have various armaments on top, but supposed to be all singing, all dancing sort of thing, but hasn't fared too well in, well, we just haven't seen too many of them in this war. But anyway, huge attack in Novomykhailivka, and we'll wait to see whether they gained any ground. The early reports are that, and I don't know exactly where, I think there was a geolocation from Tendar, I think, in this. No, that was one from February the 27th. I don't know exactly where this took place, but certainly huge attacks today. We don't know whether that would have resulted in control of some of this territory coming under the Russians there, but I don't know. It's just incredible that they used that many, when I've been saying lately that actually most attacks involve far fewer vehicles than you would expect, and that's almost certainly because they just don't have the depth in resources that you'd think they would. Well, actually, I think there's been some stockpiling going on. I did mention that could be one of the either reasons why they aren't using so much, or what they're also doing. Stockpiling for a major push. This looks like a really big one, but nonetheless, no change to the mapping there. We might see some change tomorrow. Further to the south of there, and when we talk about Novomykhailivka, it could be in this area. I'll try and find myself a geolocation for that activity, but some gains for the Russians, according to Andrew Perpetua, but more like agreeing with what Surat Maps had previously said of the area. So so some more pins there. No change to the southern front line, so good news for the Ukrainians there, and obviously no change to the Dnipro River Delta area. Just going to see if I can find a geolocation. Just to give a little bit more detail on that attack. So Special Kherson Cat says soldiers of 79th Brigade repelled one of the largest Russian assaults in total. 57 AFVs, 12 motorcycles and 200 infantrymen attacked from different directions. Russian army simultaneously used 11 tanks, 45 APCs with infantry and 1 BMP Terminator. As a result of the battle, 6 tanks, 7 APCs with infantry were knocked out, 12 motorcycles were burnt. Russians suffered losses in manpower, 40 were killed, 37 were wounded. After knocking out the first tanks and armoured vehicles, other vehicles rushed to flee the battlefield. Drone operators finished off the infantry, then ran around the landings. Now, there are some claiming here that actually it could be this is a collection of videos meshed into one. It's almost 5 to 8 different videos meshed into a single video. Notice how there are no GPS or locations given, dead giveaway. However, lots of people are sharing this at the moment, so it could well take it with a pinch of salt at the moment. I assume that when I come to speak about this tomorrow in Hits and Losses videos, there'll be more detail about that, but could be a big attack around that area. Okay, thanks for watching. Appreciate your support. It's very late. That's why my brain isn't quite working at the moment. Take care, and I'll speak to you, well, later today. Toodle pips.